need your happy ending.
Fine, here we are. So today, episode 40. Is that official happy birthday? Not quite. I'm looking forward to the 50th. Did you see episode 39, talking of episodes, with the wonderful Alex Hutchinson, the ever-informed sports journalist and bestseller of his book, Endure? He was with us last month. If you haven't heard that yet, then I strongly recommend you download it or watch it on YouTube. He was talking all about the limits of human performance. It's an incredible book. Particularly recommend the Audible version, just because of the fantastic variety of pronunciations of Kipchoge or Kipchoge or Kipchog. However you want to hear the person say it. It's not Alex narrating, by the way. It's an American gentleman actor. But that's enough of a reason to get it. It's hysterical. But anyway, no, definitely, if you haven't heard it yet, thanks for the feedback of people who have sent me emails. It's the most downloaded episode, which is no surprise, really, because Alex is very current. What with having been at Breaking 2, and he's doing so much on the shoes these days. And yeah, it's a great episode, if I say so myself, and the book is well worth buying. What else have we got? As always, I need to say hello to and thank you to the Brighton Beard Company, the place to go if, like myself and our special guest today, Tom Goom, of the hirsute variety, for your beard balms and for your beard oils and your brushes and your beard soaps and everything which will make no sense if you haven't got a beard, but lots of sense if you have got one. Yeah, that's the place to go. So www.brightonbeardcompany.co.uk is the place to be. And what else can I tell you? It's been a very busy week. Yes, it's official. We have got some dates for the 2020 RCL International Running Conference, the real thing, face-to-face contact and shaking hands and hugging it out in Brighton in the UK. Last year was a great success. All the videos are still on runchatlive.com. We have got 10. Actually, one of them was here last year. I can't announce them yet because I really want to build it up and make it exciting. But we've got 9 new speakers and 1 returner, and it's going to be a great event. Keep an eye out on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all that. And I will be announcing the speakers very soon. I'm very excited. It was so difficult because last year, basically, I just chose all my heroes, except for Tom, who couldn't make it. I could only have 10. But yeah, I chose everyone who was just shoulders that I've stood on and worshipped for years, and they all came, which was great. This year I've actually thought a bit more about what the public want to hear, and I've got some great people coming up, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll announce it next week, bit by bit. Anyway, that's all the admin out of the way. Today, dun dun dun, finally on the show. It's taken 40 episodes, mainly because I've stopped practicing as much now in Brighton as a therapist, so I haven't got to kind of see it as the competition anymore. Actually, I'm recommending someone in today. I haven't told him about that yet. I can put clients his way. But yeah, it's Mr. Tom Goom, Brighton born and bred, I think. He was from Brighton. We'll find that out later. From the physio rooms at Virgin. But apart from changing lives there, he is also the creator and star of the running repair workshops, which are now international. I've seen them happening. I haven't gone, but I've seen them happening in Chicago and all over the place, and well deserved as well. He's a fantastic physio and speaker and workshopper. And on top of that, he's got a 1-day special course as well in London, which we're going to talk about him later on, with some fantastic speakers, including Alex, who was on the show last month, and Claire Minshull and Chris Napier, and who else? Oh, some podiatrist, Ian Griffiths, I think it is. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. And also we're going to talk about happy birthday to Tom. It's not actually his birthday, but he's been a physio for, well, let's him say face to face how long he's been a physio for, just to make him feel very old. So what I would like you to do is put your hands together in your bedrooms, or in your lounges, in your homes, wherever you are, and welcome to the screen, Mr. Tom Goom. There we go.
Hi, Matt.
How's that for an intro?
Thanks for the intro, mate.
Did I pick you up enough?
Very generous. Yeah.
Well, I can never really. I'm in a lovely position now because I'm lecturing much more. I only do kind of consultations when people contact me on the website. So I haven't got to kind of not mention your name anymore. I can actually say how good you are, and I can send people your way. And I've got someone I need to talk about later on, actually, who I'm going to send you away.
Ah, awesome. Always good to help.
Well, there we go. It's fantastic. I have sung your praises. I'm lying. I've often recommended you if I couldn't fit them in. And I'm sure we've shared patience anyway, because it's amazing being in Brighton. We know, and we might talk about this later on, runners just run until they find someone who says what they want to hear, don't they?
Yeah.
And there's so many therapists now in Brighton, sports therapists and physios and osteos and chiros. We all tend to see the same person until eventually they settle down with someone. So
I always
we
thought it was
obviously
nice that you tended to actually run with your patients too, going out and doing training sessions and stuff like that. I mean, it's so important. I think if you can do that, show them you're part of the sport, it's much bigger than just being around in the clinic room, isn't it? So I always thought that was a nice thing that you did, get involved in the training and run with people, be part of the community rather than just hidden away in a little room somewhere,
Do you still find time to, I know what my answer is, but do you still find time to get out and run with your patients?
I try to, yeah, I try to, try and get involved in stuff. But yeah, it's just for striking a balance, isn't it, these days between lots of different commitments. But yeah, once they're getting up to a good level, I'll often invite them out for a little 10K or something like that. And, see if we can get a group of people together if they're coming back from injury. It's always really good, especially if it ends at a cafe somewhere and some form of bacon is involved, then it's a win for everyone, I think.
This is one of your trademarks, isn't it? I was trying to find that photo when I have guests on. I try and find photos I remember, and there was one about "and then I shall eat pie" or something. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah,
God,
later I shall have pie. Yeah, that's when that was like when I was actually still relatively young and thin and fit and stuff. So yeah, I'll try and dig out the photo for you at some point.
Oh, it's classic. You were just standing. If I remember rightly, you were kind of standing there looking up in the corner.
Yeah, looking into the middle distance thoughtfully, imagining pie.
But still, on most of the kind of brief sort of profiles on most of your social media and elsewhere, I think it's still recovering cheese addict. How's that going?
Still going, yeah. Still difficult. I've weaned off the hard stuff, but yeah, it's still a struggle on a day-to-day basis.
Oh,
yeah.
Lovely. Right. Okay. So happy kind of physio birthday. How many years has it been?
I think it's 18 years. Yeah. I think I've come of age from a physio point of view, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
Does it feel like 18 or is it kind of
yeah. Yeah. No, I don't know really. I don't know. I still find things really exciting and interesting. I think I find it more exciting and interesting now than at any stage, really. So yeah, it's good. It's good. I think the weird thing is, the more you learn, like the less certain things become, which is a bit strange. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're suddenly like uber confident. I think you recognize how much there is to know and how little of it any of us do know.
And have you reached the age yet where you're kind of cool with not knowing?
I think so. It makes me want to find out more. I think I find it interesting how everything goes in cycles, and as we're going to talk about how some stuff is suddenly really important, then suddenly dropped, and that's kind of happening with load management at the minute. There's a move away from load management, which I'm a bit surprised about, but so it's interesting. And same with all the pain science stuff. I was a big fan of that, and you saw a lot of chronic back pain patients when I was in the NHS, and then now we're getting new reviews showing it doesn't have big effects on pain or disability, and I'm wondering where that's going to go next. So it's all change.
Yeah, probably like me, you follow. I know you do. You follow a similar crowd, and some of the people we follow, basically, it seems they like to challenge anything once it starts getting a bit popular, and often it's what they started trying to make popular. But once it reaches that popular level, it's like, well, hold on. Let's not, everyone seems to be saying this now, let's not go over the top and swing too far the other way, which is kind of a healthy thing sometimes. But I've quite liked watching in the shadows you challenging some of the people who are kind of dismissing everything and kind of saying, well, you can't, do you do that consciously or?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I always try and sort of strive a little bit for a bit of balance and recognizing that everything has got its pros and cons. And there's also the real world kind of real clinic that we need to manage. And that's not necessarily the same as something that's reproduced in a research paper. And I think when people are kind of pulling everything apart, they almost seem to enjoy that process of ripping everything apart. And I think, well, how do you help that person in front of you that's really desperate for your help if you're kind of dismissing every option you've got? So I kind of want to lean the other way and sort of see that where things can have a role and perhaps be a little bit more open to stuff. But also just recognizing human nature. Human nature is people don't really follow advice, oddly enough. Like, we know this. Runners are a great example of this. We can advise them around training, but a lot of people don't necessarily follow advice, and they don't necessarily do their exercises. And there's lots of things about being a human. We're not very logical. So if we assume that people will behave logically and follow our advice, we're going to get it wrong a lot of the time. So I think we need to be a little bit more open to other things and other ways of getting that buy-in and working together with that patient a little bit more, and maybe a little bit less like, no, this doesn't work, we can't use it at all.
No, I think you're perfectly right. And I've noticed as well, there is now a bit of a bandwagon that a lot of people are jumping on, where they're just being quite just slagging off therapists who come up with these practices, and it's bad, because I think it scares people from talking, doesn't it? Especially, I'm not on Twitter so much now, but Twitter, there's the problem where you just can't give that much information out, so it's impossible to have a proper conversation. Even on Facebook now, as people are hanging out in forums and just kind of trying to pull down anybody who says, oh, I do this or I do that, when it's not really constructive, is it?
No. And I think it's a shame, because sometimes it stops people having what would be some really good conversations, because you can't, on Twitter, sometimes it's harder to get a tweet out than it is to get something through peer review in a journal, that might sound like an exaggeration, but genuinely, I've seen things go through peer review that I know would not get out on Twitter without being leapt on. And that's a shame, really, because we should be able to discuss ideas and maybe, talk a little bit more openly. And I think we need to be maybe a little bit more realistic, don't we? Like, one of the things that gets pounded a lot is massage, for example. So something like massage will be dismissed as low quality, and something like pain science-based education would be considered high quality. But if you compare the evidence for both of them, there isn't that big a gulf, really. Like, especially the recent reviews saying like pain science-based education isn't that effective for reducing pain or disability. So then we can't really suggest one is low quality and one is high quality when the evidence doesn't really support that. But it's what's fashionable. If you were on Twitter advocating massage, you would be hounded for it. And I don't think people have that same criticism of the things that are more in vogue. But I also think nothing happens in isolation. If someone is doing a massage, you don't do it in silence. You're chatting, you're learning about the patient, you're sharing ideas, you may be sowing the seeds about how movement's positive for them. So I think there's a bigger picture that we need to see about some of these treatments,
Most definitely. And that's a great example with massage. I tend to, there's a lot of speakers and presenters who I'm big fans of, but they will vehemently say, I never have massage, it's the kind of devil's work. And it's like, well, yeah, you don't like massage, but for people who do like massage, like you say, it's a gateway to talking, it's a gateway to educating, it's physical contact, it's the whole Diane Jacobs grooming thing. I still do it and I teach it. I'm very careful to let students know that, yeah, you're not breaking down adhesions or knots, and you're not trying to make everyone symmetrical, but there's still a lot of benefit you can get in terms of helping people recover and in terms of reducing pain, even though it's momentary, and allowing them to progress in their rehab ladder and stuff. So yeah, it's very good. But that was why I wanted you on the show today and chose to talk about what we're going to do, because we are going to take a little trip down memory lane and see some of the things which maybe were very, very fashionable. And you and I both did probably, I don't know, about 18 years ago, but definitely like 5 years ago. And now we've learned a bit, but without slagging it off, without making people out there feel very little, because we did it. That's the idea.
Yeah.
And I think any therapist would agree that they've evolved. And if you haven't evolved and you're still doing what you did 10 years ago, then you probably haven't been reading anything. So it's going to be a positive thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
A positive learning process, which is why I love following you, because you're very positive and you, like you say, you give that message out on social media. It's not about criticizing each other. It's about talking and debating and learning.
Yeah. Because people, I mean, I've had a few clinicians talk to me to say that, you know, they feel like they're in a bit of a dark place sometimes because they don't feel there's anything they can offer, because people are using evidence as a brick to throw at people rather than as the building block for something. And that's not a great position for a clinician to be in, a bit disillusioned, not really feeling they're able to help. And I think that's a real shame. You know, if we need to exercise a judgment with every patient, don't we, about when something's appropriate and, you know, when it's not. And I think that's something we need to try and encourage more, is like, you know, judicial use of treatments as opposed to a blanket ban. And, you know, if you use this, you're a quack. Like, I think it's about judgment and about, you know, knowing people, isn't it? A bit more than black and white stuff, you know.
Is this something which you bring up on your workshops and you spend a bit of time kind of warning or telling other clinicians?
A little bit. I mean, there's a slide like really early on, which is all about sort of that, you know, there's lots of shades of grey, and I like to say that right at the start, because it's true. It's not. I really don't think it's black and white when you're working with people. I think a lot of it's about reasoning and judgment and working with an individual. And yes, working within the evidence, of course, that is important. But you've also got to work with the person in front of you and choose what you think is appropriate for them. I did a nice example of that recently in clinic. So a patient presenting with back and bilateral leg pain, who was like just ringing all the bells for me, like flags that I just wasn't sitting right. You know, this is a really fit and active marathon runner. You know, has only seen me once for a knee problem and then is off doing absolutely brilliantly and didn't feel she never needed to see me again. But is complaining of this really severe debilitating pain where she can barely, you know, walk with it at times, night pain, you know, all sorts of problems with it. And I'm thinking, this just doesn't sit right. So you take that patient in that situation, you say, right, okay, let's give you a massage. Like, no, you're kind of you're missing the big picture here. And I, you know, there were lots of things going on. And instead of doing something like that, I said, right, let's get you in front of the GP quickly. Let's get some routine blood tests, because she had quite a few inflammatory signs. And actually it turned out she had a severely underactive thyroid. And that can sometimes cause like quite severe muscle cramps. And we think that may be what was going on. So, you know, that situation is a good example of where, no, don't be jumping on that patient with massage. Like, use it judiciously. Think about what that patient needs, and that patient doesn't need that. And it's always got to be a judgment that takes place. And only with time, you see if you've made the right judgment, I think. That's
good. And yeah, and you had a few red flags there, like you said, that the nighttime pain, and because I'm teaching
early morning stiffness for an hour. You know, there were lots of things going on there that, you know, you've got to be able to react to those and not just say, right, yeah, everybody, you know, comes in with back pain, you're going to get on the couch, you're going to get some of this, that, and the other. That's, you know, that's not the way to go with it. You've got to judge each case, I think.
Yeah, and this is the thing. I love massage therapists. I love teaching them, but one of the most important things for massage therapists is to know the red flags and to know when to refer on and have that network. And again, not be afraid to say, you know what, I'm not quite happy with this. I'm not quite happy that you're getting these nighttime pains. I'm not quite happy with this fact the swelling hasn't gone down and it's getting worse. And because, like you say, otherwise it could be something much more serious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, right. The time has come. So before we go into your top 5 things that have changed, when you started 18 years ago, were you already a keen runner yourself? Were you already thinking, I'm going to work with runners, or how did that evolve?
I was a reluctant runner. I used to run to try and stay fit, but I was like, I had 2 paces, like stop or go. There was no real so I just used to go out for about 20 minutes, half an hour, and just get it done as quickly as I could. So it was always hellish, because when you're running like that every time, you just feel like you're battling it. And then I got much more hooked in it. I guess probably about 10, 12 years ago, something like that. I started to get into running more slowly and actually enjoying running for the sake of it. But yeah, I mean, over a long time, I used to compete for my school and things like that. But yeah, last 10 to 12 years, I've really kind of got the love for it. And now it's one of those things I couldn't be without. And, you know, I think it's the same for a lot of runners. If you can't run, there's a big piece of something missing in your life, you know.
Definitely. And running physio came along, what year?
2012. Yeah. So that happened almost by accident. I was writing on Runners World forums trying to advise people with running injury, and I realized that online you can only really give generic advice. So I thought, well, I'll put together a little website so I can just link to articles. It'd be easier. So then I started writing the articles, and I realized, okay, right, I need one for ITB pain and patellofemoral pain and Achilles tendinopathy. So I researched each of them, wrote an article on each of them, and it just kind of grew by accident, really, from there.
I remember seeing some of those in the early days on Runners World. This was just you entering the forums and just giving some advice just to people who were amazing. How altruistic of you.
Well, it was quite nice. It's there's quite nice people on there, and when you're a runner, and I'm sure it's the same for you, you just want to keep other people running if you can, and it kind of sprung from there, really.
Fantastic, yeah. And the site shows, I mean, they were the beginnings, which I'd imagine your site came from, because it is full of fantastic advice, and it's all free, and it's like amazing. So thank you for that site. I've dipped in there many a time. Okay, so let's go. What are you going to bring up first of all? Something which maybe has changed.
So the first one I think about this is that's changed, like stretching. So certainly when I was a runner at school, when we first qualified, back in 2002. Every runner was told to stretch, stretch before your sport, after your sport. And the wisdom was that it would prevent injury. And if you didn't stretch, then you'd get injured. So everybody had to stretch. I think that is something that really has changed. In fact, to a point now where there's a debate over whether it has a role at all. So it's kind of a classic one that's gone full circle to everybody needs to do it, to maybe nobody does. And again, with most things, probably the truth lies in the middle there somewhere. But we've had those big review papers that found that it doesn't seem to stretching before or after sport doesn't reduce injury risk. And we've had those studies showing that it might reduce power and therefore have a negative effect on performance. And I think that is why we're moving probably more away from it now. Plus, we know it can irritate certain tendon problems. So actually, when people come in and say, "Oh, I've got this sore hamstring tendon, I've been given a load of stretches to do," we often actually stop them doing those and replace them with something more strength-based that doesn't irritate them so much.
That's a biggie, and I'm nodding my head and then conscious in my mind of not just letting that go, because I'm always aware that we are in our little bubble and we surround ourselves with people who kind of know this, who are aware of kind of where stretching can actually annoy certain tendinopathies like hamstring and insertional Achilles. But a lot of therapists, I'm sure, I mean, the same definitely happened to me when I was full-time in the clinic. But do you still see, sadly, a lot of runners who are basically just being given stretches, for example, for Achilles issues and proximal hamstring? And how do you deal with that? Does it kind of depress you, thinking, why are they being told this still in this day and age? And it doesn't matter where they come from. I find it's physios, chiros, osteo, sports therapists. Or do you think, great, I've still got something I can give these people? Does it annoy you at all or frustrate you?
I think it's kind of a mix of the two. It does make me think a little bit that it's a bit of a shame, perhaps, that practice isn't changing. But it also makes me think, there's something easy we can do here that might help this person's pain, that they're probably going to be quite happy to do, which is stop doing a whole load of stretches that they're telling me have made it worse. So in some ways, like, it is better if a patient's giving you options, like easy ones like that you can change straight away, easy wins, if you like. I think probably the biggest culprit I see is gluteal tendinopathy. I think that's the one where actually people are given, and they're given the stretches that are often really provocative, like pigeon pose stretches and piriformis stretches and ITB stretches. So I think that's of all of them the one that possibly is worst. Insertional Achilles tendinopathy is a problem as well. I mean, I saw a guy a little while back who was told by his therapist to ice his foot till it was numb and then stretch it off the edge of a step, and so the advice is, just don't do that, don't do that, and it'll feel better for it. And actually it did, just taking away the provocative stretches helped. But again, it's, there's always got to be matching up real world and research. There are some patients who, oddly enough, might buck the trend and might say, do you know what, actually I find they do help a little bit. So I'm never rigid about these things. It's always about, like, okay, well, how do you find you respond to the stretch? Does it stir it up? Does it aggravate it? Does it seem to help? Most of the time, 9 times out of 10, will try and replace it with something strength-based. But if they're sure it helps their symptoms, then, I might say, okay, yeah, keep it in there. If it's helping you, I don't see that as so much of a problem, really.
That's good. That's healthy. Okay, so I'm going to make sure we got some decent show notes for this time, because there's going to be a lot of important things for therapists to take away with them. Hopefully therapists will listen to this who aren't already massive fans of Tom or myself, and it's actually something new. So that's the important thing. If you are already on the same page as myself and Tom, and you listen to this podcast or watching the video, do share it on your social media. Share it so that people who haven't turned over this page yet actually become aware of it. You can turn around patients' recovery time by taking out stretching in at least 3 or 4 tendinopathy issues by giving them that simple advice. So it's an important one.
I suppose it links into kind of other ideas as well. Like, there's something that I don't think we necessarily think about that often, is we're very capable of actually making people worse. And I don't think we necessarily always entertain that as an option, that I might make this person worse. And that kind of comes back to that little discussion we had on massage too. So I see a lot of people with gluteal tendinopathy who are given stretches, and then someone gets into their glutes tendon with an elbow to do some massage, and actually really makes it a lot worse. So I think, again, it's about that judicial use of it, and actually recognizing when sometimes it might make things worse. I think that's quite an important thing for us to recognize. And remembering the alternatives to stretching. And if you can strengthen to lengthen is a phrase. I think that might be one of Adam Meakin's, sounds like one of his. But if you load the tissue in a lengthened position, or load it more eccentrically, you can gain flexibility without having to do lots of static stretches. So there's other ways of getting a better result, I think.
I do believe that questioning, if you are a stretcher and you give out lots of stretching, once you kind of open that tin up and start thinking, should I be giving this stretching? Oh, this can actually make it worse. It's a good intro to questioning other practices which you've grown up with. Because I used to hand out stretches much more than I do now. And I imagine fresh out of physio, you were kind of take this photocopy from the photocopy. There's your stretches. We all used to do it. But I think it's a good intro, isn't it, to change people and start realizing that, like you say, it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but it's realizing some of the things we were taught might not be quite right.
Yeah, and then it's on my website. It might still be there buried as a sofa stretch, a video I put together about how to use your sofa cushions to give your hip flexors a good stretch, which is basically kneeling on a sofa cushion and going into a lunge position. So I've advocated stretches, absolutely, and I'm not completely anti them now, but I just want to, if I'm going to give them out, they've got to be for a reason. It's not a generic thing every runner feels that they should do. It's like, okay, well, in your case, this stretch seems to help your flexibility and your symptoms, and those are the reasons why I'm going to suggest you do it. And I think that's fine if it's as a reasoning process and there's a positive result. Just not like you're a runner, therefore you must do these 10 stretches. That's not the same, really.
You're good. You're much calmer than me. I'm far more sarcastic and cynical. I get runners coming in going, because you must get it as well. You get runners coming in, clutching their hamstrings and going, I know what the problem is. I've got tight hamstrings. And I've been known to just make them pick up a pen or a weight off the floor, and they'll fall down into it and pick it up. And I go, right, so you were saying you got tight hamstrings. Yeah, they're really tight. And I'll drop something again. Just pick that up, will you? Until the coin drops that they realize, I haven't got tight hamstrings, have I? Because then it opens up this kind of conversation about just because it hurts doesn't mean it's tight. And that's a big one, isn't it, with runners? That's still prevalent today. We always think that if something hurts, it's because it's tight.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And runners, quite often something is tight because it's overworked. And there might be weakness at the center of that, or it might be fatigue at the center of that, or a bit of both. But quite often a tight hamstring is one that's struggling with the workload it's exposed to. So just stretching it, well, it's not really doing anything long term for that. What you need to look at is the workload that hamstring's having to do and its capability of handling it. And the recovery process that person's using, so you might adjust their training load to reduce the stress on the hamstring, increase their recovery to reduce the fatigue, strengthen the hamstring to improve its capacity to cope with it. And of course, it's all intertwined, because as you get to know that person, and it's kind of a nebulous thing really, but maybe you start to recognize why they're not recovering very well. They've got like a really long working day. The only way they can squeeze in training is to do it early in the morning, so they sacrifice sleep. Like that's the kind of bit that you never sort of see in a research paper necessarily, but you've got to get to know that person and problem solve that, which is not easy. So there's always a bigger picture, I think, at play, and that's why we've got to be a little bit careful about sort of seeing everything as black and white, really.
Very good. Excellent stuff. We could talk on one more thing that, again, bugs me about stretching is runners don't need to be that flexible. Why do runners stick themselves into swan poses anyway? Why are they trying to touch their toes? I mean, the research has actually shown, I like kind of quoting this, I'm not sure if it's been debunked yet or weakened, but there's papers which do show, I think it's amongst elites, which is kind of, but actually having less hamstring flexibility, scoring less in a sit and reach test has been correlated with higher performance and faster speeds and stuff. If we look at the whole muscle as a spring, there is an argument that actually you're going to be less flexible if that muscle is more responsive to load and stuff. But this doesn't seem to get through to runners. They're still trying to touch their toes. For what reason? When would you ever touch your toes during a marathon?
Yeah. Only if things have gone horribly wrong. Yeah. No, I think I like the spring analogy because it works quite well with stretching. And this is obviously a massive oversimplification, but if you think about your muscle, as a bit of a spring, you want it to be stiff enough to bounce you along. You don't want it to be like a 1980s slinky that you drop it on the floor and it just goes splat. So if you take that spring and you do a long static stretch, you kind of lengthen the spring, don't you? And the downside of that is for a short period of time, it's not as able to produce enough stiffness and enough force. So, but after a while, like about 30 minutes, the spring goes back to its normal length because we know stretches don't seem to create long-term length changes. But if you do your loading in a lengthened position, your eccentric loading perhaps, instead of just stretching the spring out, you're adding coils to the bottom of it to make it physically longer. You're actually making the muscle longer. So to my mind, it makes much more sense then. You've got a strong, long spring, which is kind of win-win, as opposed to a spring that gets a bit floppy for a bit and then goes back to where it was.
Very good. No, great analogy to use with patients. Really good, and even good to have at our gate. I still do gait with at Stride UK, but we've actually got a tight coiled spring and then a slinky. Brilliant. It's kind of a nice visual just to show someone. So, and it is a simplification, but it helps some people go, oh yeah, it's true. So you're saying it doesn't matter if I can't touch my toes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I come from martial arts, and the reason I'm on it is because I used to kick people in the head happily, and then as I moved out of that and into running, I noticed I was losing my flexibility because I wasn't kicking high anymore, but also because my hamstrings were getting much stronger, and it was like a case of you have to choose what you want to do. Do you want to have these like being able to get your leg up high, or do you want to have this responsive kind of spring thing going on? So
yeah, it's hard to have both.
It's a big thing, isn't it? Okay, we could talk for longer, but we won't. Yeah, I'm excited to see what your number 2 is. Take it away.
Number 2. Okay, number 2 is one that you've got to have the little speech marks in. So core stability.
Okay.
You're not allowed to say it without the thingies. But yeah, core stability, massive change in the last 18, 20 years. I remember the early days of being a student and actually coming into practice, and honestly, like I never really understood how we meant to teach people to do try to transabs work. There are all these different sort of descriptions, take your belly button in an inch, but then you weren't allowed to do it and breathe the wrong way. Apparently there's a wrong way to breathe. You'd overuse your diaphragm or something like, and I was, how do you know? How can you tell? How do you overuse a diaphragm? Aren't you breathing with it? And the whole time I was confused about it. And we were teaching patients that it was vitally important for everything, back pain, obviously, neck pain, potentially shoulder pain, bit of a sore jaw. Yeah, it'll be your core. It was kind of trotted out to everything. And if it confused me as a therapist, I'm pretty sure it confused a lot of patients who were stood there told before they could do any exercise, they had to activate their core. And then that has kind of fallen apart fairly rapidly. We've realized now that actually you don't need, your core will activate. You don't need to tell it to. I think that's true of a lot of muscles. It's another kind of side myth, really, this idea that, muscles muscles activate. You don't have to tell them to. You don't have to sort of, you do the task, the muscle will kick in, on its own in most cases. But now we're moving hopefully away from these kind of older fashioned views of core, and hopefully it's starting to be redefined a little bit. And that's the difficult thing at the minute. It's another one where I don't think we want to throw it out altogether, but I think maybe we just need to recognize the parts of it that are valuable, and maybe not use the parts that aren't, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, it was. It's a nice example, isn't it, of a paper that's come out, or a series of papers, and then even the author, after a few years, has gone, you know what, actually, who was well ahead of their time, has turned around and gone, actually, no, there's tests we did with the transverse abdominis and all that, and we found out that it fired. It's not actually such a big deal. But by then it was too late, wasn't it? Because you got the DVDs, the schools, the workshops. It's a problem of the digital age, I think. The same thing happened with Gil Headley and the fuzz and fascia and everything, where he came out again, a fantastic mind ahead of the game, who produces this fantastic new video showing cadavers and this fuzz and how. And then he himself later on said, actually, I've thought about it, and yeah, you have to be dead for that to happen. And obviously we're alive. But
minor limitation.
But it's no discredit to them. And you could name a huge amount. All these people who come out with these ideas are well ahead of the game. And then later, normally they're the first ones to go, actually it's not quite right. We have to change a bit. But it's too late, isn't it, by then?
But it's brilliant when they do that. I think that's the thing. It's so valuable when they're the one that started it and have come out and said, look, we got this wrong. And it's something I want to hold my hands up to as well. I think I'm quite interested by new findings, new research, and it's quite easy to jump on those bandwagons because if they fit your biases and run with it before actually maybe there's enough evidence to do so. So I think we've all got to be a little bit careful of those things. It happened with isometrics in tendinopathy. One really interesting paper with a massive reduction in pain, but only 6 patients. And then within a couple of years, it's everywhere. Isometrics are everyone should use it for tendon pain. And then the follow-up studies find it's much less effective than we thought. So I think it's maybe just being a bit patient and waiting for the evidence base to evolve a little bit, really. So, but coming back to the core things, one of the papers that I quite like on it is from about 2013. I think it's Martuscello et al., where they looked at different exercises and how they recruited like the core musculature. And they compared things like, tummy tuck exercises, sitting on a gym ball, etc., with traditional strength and conditioning like squats, lunges, and stuff like that. And actually, you seem to recruit those core muscles more squatting, deadlifting, lunging than you do sitting on a gym ball. So if you want to work the core, then you could well do that by doing some good S&C. And I think then we've got to try and work out those people that might benefit from interventions around the core and what those are. So one area possibly is like hamstring muscle injuries. There's a tiny bit of evidence, like one study that found that, including some kind of trunk-based exercises seem to reduce the risk of recurrence of hamstring injury, if I remember the research right. So then it's a question, well, what is it? Like, what do we need to be doing here? Is it tummy tuck stuff? Probably not. Is it around strengthening some of the muscles around the core? Perhaps, maybe. So I think hopefully it's an idea that will evolve until we realise which parts of it are actually useful. Yeah,
that's a big one. Were you? I mean, I know, hand on heart, I used to do squats on fit balls, press ups on fit balls. I mean, it was the fit ball era, wasn't it? Especially around 2004, 5. Everything was fit balls, wasn't it? I was doing NASM, which was all about, it was great at the time, again, ahead. It was kind of the era of Paul Check and NASM and all this stuff. And you do your fit ball work, first of all, to activate the core. And then you'd follow that up, superset it with your bench, because now you've activated your core and stuff. And it was amazing. It was great programming and we really enjoyed it. But then it all kind of changed when we realized you'll never reach your full potential doing a bench press on a fit ball. It's just going to happen. And that's for squatting on a fit ball. But you don't really see that anymore, do you? In the Virgin, have you still got people doing?
Sometimes it's a kind of it's like, well, what's your goal with that exercise? Because if your goal is to build strength, then you want to load heavy, which you're not going to be able to do balance precariously on a football. It's, you know, so if you want to get strong, go and get off that and go and lift some heavier weights. If you want to improve your balance on unstable surfaces, then balance on unstable surfaces, that's fine, but you're not helping yourself lugging a great big load at the same time, really. So
and do Boso boards and all that fit into it as well? Was there, did we overuse Boso boards and stability cushions and all that? Was it all a bit
I think so. You know, we like our toys, don't we? We like our rehab toys. Yeah. It's quite good fun. I still think, again, it's like, you know, recognizing some kind of role for some of these things. If you've got to deal with unstable, wobbly surfaces during your sport, you know, if you're a surfer and you're trying to balance on a surfboard, then I think it's quite reasonable to try and do some balance work that is similar to that. You know, if you're a trail runner and you've got to expose your ankles to rapid change of direction, then you might want rehab that includes unstable surfaces and rapid change of direction. It's fine, but when you're doing that in the real world running, you're generally not doing it with a 50-kilogram bar on your shoulders. You know? So you look at control as a goal and you focus on control, and you lift heavier when you're focusing on strength. I guess that's how I would tend to see it.
It's very good. Have you, just before we move on from core stability, obviously it was very difficult. The explosion in Pilates kind of went hand in hand with this, concentrating and focusing and drawing, like you say. An
explosion in Pilates. It seems a bit too gentle for that.
No, not with the original.
An explosion in Pilates.
Yeah, no, not with the original. Oh, Joe with his 101. It was very explosive. But Pilates was originally, I'm sure you know, Pilates was originally made for like boxers and hardcore athletes, and it was a real big thing. And then later on, when this whole core stability thing started, it suddenly got very slow and more kind of intrinsic, and you're pulling a piece of string under your belly button. And I was in it as well. It was part of we do our floor exercises as part of personal training and stuff. But I think Pilates teachers in particular have had to make quite a big turnaround. Because again, it's not throwing it all out. There could be some fantastic. I love taking people down to the ground if they need that, taking gravity out of the equation. But it's, again, like you say, it's not.
And I should say, I'm joking really. I mean, I know there's some really fantastic Pilates classes out there that really do challenge people and take people to really difficult levels. So I certainly wouldn't want people to think I'm dismissing that really. But yeah, I think that's the thing, is if you build your whole ethos around something and that something starts to fall away, it's difficult, and you have to kind of think about doing it differently again. But maybe it's then just about saying, okay, well, there's good news here. You don't need to tuck your tummy button in before you do this move. So let's not focus on that. Let's focus on other things that we could do to achieve your goals, like, you know, increasing the range that you're going to do it over, or increasing the load, or improving your confidence with it, or, you know, so it can be a positive thing sometimes to be able to drop something, you know, that isn't working and go, right, we don't have to do that anymore. That's good. We can do something else.
But you've just nailed it on the head. If you are the wall is being able to actually physically say to someone, you know what, I'm going to tweak this a little bit. Some new stuff's come out. I've been reading, and not thinking that they're going to lose confidence in you. Once you can do that, I think it opens up a lot of doors and makes you a far more effective therapist, not being embarrassed about changing things. And clients will appreciate it, won't they? They didn't come in saying, I want to be able to stand on a football and do a squat. They never asked for that. It was us who give it to them.
No, they just want to stop hurting. That as their goal. No.
Okay, cool.
But there's also that downside of the stories that we tell and the negatives we don't necessarily see. I think I've had a few people recently that, like, they're very hooked on activation. Like, you know, you'll be doing an exercise with them, but I can't feel my glutes activating. I can't feel my glutes on that side. It's not activating. And you have to reassure them that, you know, we've only done a couple of reps. Let's build it up. Let's worry about feeling a burn. I want you to feel like the glutes are tired by the end of it. That's what we need to worry about here. Not trying to feel this. I mean, who can feel like their glutes activating? Do you know what I mean? Like, let's not be worried about whether this muscle is switching on and off. Like, let's load it a little bit and see when you can start to feel it getting a bit tired, feel the burn a bit. Then that's telling us we're giving it a good workout. So, and it can be quite hard to pull people away from that. If they've been told it for a long time, they've been told it by lots of people that their glutes aren't activating, and then they see someone new that doesn't agree with that, it can be difficult to change that mindset, unfortunately. So there are downsides, I think, of the stories we tell, I think.
Definitely. And I don't know if you've got it coming up, but like, language could be one of these points, changing the language we used to use. back in the day and now actually thinking about the words we use, like you're saying, because it can have a negative effect. But I don't want to bring that up in case you brought it up. Anyway, we're going to crack on. Number 2 was core stability, in inverted commas, core stability. What's next, mate?
Oh, next one with runners that's kind of hopefully starting to change now, but is switching to forefoot. For quite a long time, everyone was told that forefoot is best. Everyone should run forefoot, and using all the kind of classic terms, it's more natural, to run forefoot. It's going to be better for everyone. I like a phrase I heard on Twitter recently, like it's entirely natural to be mauled by a bear, but that doesn't make it good for you. So natural isn't always best, whatever whatever we define natural is. But that's something where for me, and I'm sure for you as well, Matt, like it's been a big source of frustration because I've seen so many runners that come in with calf pain, Achilles pain, plantar fascial problems, foot problems, because they've been told they must switch, and they've switched, and now something really hurts. And it's a part of the tribalism we get with everything, but particularly in running. Like, people think there's one right way, and if you believe that, you're going to end up butting heads against someone who doesn't believe that. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Rather than recognizing the grey areas again and the case for each individual, really. So hopefully that is starting to change. We've had a systematic review just published, Anderson et al., I think it was, showing that there aren't really great performance benefits from switching to forefoot. In fact, if anything, it seems to make our running economy worse in the short term. It doesn't seem to reduce injury rates. It just maybe changes where you get injured. So a forefoot runner perhaps more likely to have problems with the calf, Achilles, foot and ankle. Rear foot, maybe more problems around the hip and knee. So if it isn't going to reduce your injury risk, and it's not going to make you run faster, but it might give you a really tight calf or a really sore Achilles, to me, it's not, the risk isn't really worth the little benefit. So hopefully we can, reassure people that if they want to run on their heels, they can. It's fine. It's normal. Doesn't have to change.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's definitely and I think it is there was a spate of time, wasn't there? I mean, as people bought for like Born to Run and stuff and read it, and it's getting less, but I still see runners who, one of the biggest questions I'm sure you ask as well, in like when you're doing a getting NAS or something, is there anything you consciously try and do when you're running? Have you read anything, or are you trying to do anything? And then it comes out, doesn't it? Oh yeah, actually I'm trying to pick my heels up. If they come in with a hamstring strain, it's like, yeah, I'm trying to bring my heels up higher to my bum. I'm trying to run in my toes. And it just shows the subjective part of the case history is really important, isn't it? Because there is so much information out there you can read, and it can cause injuries. Not always, but it can cause them. And
runners don't necessarily always put 2 and 2 together, so they might not think that switching to forefoot's that important. So that's where we've got to sometimes probe and ask about those things. And again, it's sometimes challenging with beliefs. A gentleman a little while back who'd been advised by his coach to switch to forefoot, again because it's best. Everyone should run forefoot, was the advice of this particular coach. And yet he switched to forefoot, and now he can only run 3K before his calves tighten up so much that he has to stop. And when we actually looked at his running style, it was much, much less efficient forefoot. And this is sometimes what happens. We assume that when you switch to forefoot, you get the running gait of a habitual forefoot striker. But the research actually suggests that's not necessarily true. Your running pattern won't necessarily look like someone who's run forefoot their whole life. And it can create this bouncy running pattern where people, they kind of bounce up and down. They expend all this energy going up and down. They end up with very little stride length. And it makes them less efficient because they're no longer really moving forward. So you end up with an injured runner who's actually slower than they were. So, but with that gentleman and lots of other people in the past, when you try and get them to change back to the normal foot strike, there can be reluctance because they've really bought into it. So it's a little bit of like gaining their trust and explaining your reasoning and, seeing if you can get them on board with at least coming back a little bit away from this new painful style.
Definitely. It's one to take on board. I think sometimes it's a disadvantage of being an experienced runner and looking after runners, because there's that danger, isn't there, of always forcing on your patients what maybe works for you. Maybe you are a forefoot runner and you've seen yourselves, but you got to hold back and just deal with the person in front of you. It's a good one. Really? I've been there. I did it. I was in Mexico on holiday, running along the beach in the sand, barefoot, listening to the Tamaran Indians in the winds, chanting my name. Double Achilles tendinopathy, back at work, limping around for 2 weeks. It happens. We've all been there and done it. 'Cause it's exciting. We love change. We love thinking this is the one. This is how it's all going to happen.
That's it.
It's very rare, isn't it? There's one thing you can do which is going to solve everything.
Absolutely, it's consistency that works, isn't it? But you know, you've I know we've we've run and done events together. You've seen my skinny little legs and my tiny weeny calf muscles.
I was going to mention them.
There's no way on earth they'd tolerate forefoot running. Like if I switched to forefoot, my calves would be screaming at me. So, you know, it's about like how does it work with the, you know, different people, what's relevant for them really.
I've noticed a change in your videos you put out these days. You are normally wearing trousers now, tracksuits of some form. It used to be all shorts, didn't it? But
I know. It's my wife's fault. She says I've got legs like hairy golf clubs, and so I'm a bit sensitive. I kind of keep them hidden now. Yeah, probably for the best.
I wouldn't say don't listen to your wife because that'd be foolish, but yeah. All right, mate. Number 4.
So number 4 kind of links a little bit to number 3, and it's how our views on running shoes have changed. And this has been a big change as well. So back in the 2000s and things, and still quite a lot. This is still something that we see a lot. That running shoes were divided up into your neutral shoe, your motion control shoe, stability shoe, etc. And your shoes were selected based on things like wet foot tests. So you can tread in some water and see what shape your footprint leaves, or someone has a look at your foot and decides you're a bit pronated, therefore you need some kind of motion control shoe. And a lot of that was sold, I guess, marketed by the shoe companies to create a problem, as in you pronate and that's a problem, and a solution, as in this shoe prevents that, which is kind of a marketing strategy that lots of stuff has done quite successfully. I think, for example, mouthwash, I think the term halitosis, as in bad breath, was invented by the people that make mouthwash to sell mouthwash.
I knew that, really.
So I think, so it's one of those things again where it starts to demonize certain things, and then that has negative knock-on effects. Patients sort of say, "Oh, I'm very flat-footed," or so there are downsides to these things. But this is something that is starting to evolve and change. Some really important research from Rasmus Nielsen and their group in about 2013. I'm sure you know it, the big study of nearly 1,000 runners finding that more pronated foot type wasn't associated with increased injury risk, and more studies, challenging whether we can make people's shoe prescription based on just looking at their foot, really. So that's another thing. Hopefully, it's evolving, but it's still a bit of an unanswered question in terms of how do we prescribe shoes, because we had a model that wasn't really based on much, that has sort of been dropped now. So it becomes a bit more challenging to know, okay, what is the new way? How do we do it now,
Yeah, has it been dropped? This websites. I had Simon Bartold on the show, and I blocked out who it was, but we had 2 leading brands of shoes, and one of them had moved with the science. They'd taken out any mention of overpronation, and they were talking a bit more. They had some great tests. Do some tests, I mean, it was good. It was talking about how many miles you're going to do, what sort of terrain you're going to be on, blah 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 blah. But then we went to another site, leading brand, not at the top anymore, but it was all just pronation. You are an overpronator, and it's still in 2020. It's still on the website. Last time I checked.
Really.
So that's the massive hits, isn't it? That's where people are still going to and believing and trusting, and it's a tricky one. It's an uphill struggle sometimes with the whole pronation, isn't it?
It is, and I think one of the things that stood out to me when I reviewed the literature, because I did a bonus module for running repairs online on footwear selection, and I did a big kind of literature review for that. And one of the things that came out from that was that people's individual response to shoes is very variable and a bit difficult for us to predict. So that it makes it hard for us to make assumptions about how someone will respond to a certain shoe. So the kind of conclusions I reached at that point were, my advice around shoe selection, first and foremost, would be don't make a big change, because if you make a big change, it may well change the way the tissues are loaded quite a lot, and that may irritate something. And the second point was do be guided by comfort. And I know we have this, what they call the comfort filter now, and it's being questioned a little bit, but I do think it's sensible to choose a shoe that feels comfortable to run in. I think that's got sensible advice, really. And then third thing was to try and see if you can pick a shoe that's perhaps a little bit towards the lighter end of the spectrum if you can, because we know that lighter shoes can help our running economy a little bit. And then the final point was thinking about, like, if you're injured, which one feels best in terms of your symptoms, because we can make all theories about how a shoe might influence load, but it's actually the symptoms we're more interested in. So if I've got an injured runner who's thinking about getting a new pair of shoes, I might say, well, is there any chance you can get down the running shop and try a few on the treadmill and see which feels most comfortable for your symptomatic area, and that might be the shoe that you want to lean a little bit more towards, rather than correcting some kind of mythical movement fault. Thinking more about, does it actually help your symptoms, and is it comfortable to run in? That's very good.
Yeah, I love those points. And are they still available on the website, or was it, you said it was part of a bonus for?
Part of the Running Repairs online, the kind of online version of the course. So yeah, it's still very much part of the online course.
Great advice. Very good. Right, I'm conscious of the time. Give me number 5.
Number five. Okay, so big change, and this is a positive change, I think, is we are moving now towards lifting heavy weights for our runners. Back in the day when I was at university, I remember it pretty clearly. The classic story was, you've got a marathon runner, how are you going to get them to do their exercises? And it would be low load and lots of reps for endurance. And I think we realized that the tissues during running are exposed to quite high peak loads. And actually that we think a lot of the endurance adaptations that we want people get from their sport, things like increasing mitochondrial numbers and capillary density and things like that. You get that from your running, your cycling, your swimming. So it maybe isn't so beneficial to try and do loads of reps with low load. Actually, probably what we want is heavier weight and lower reps, so you can build strength, which then can help to improve your running economy, potentially your performance as well. So I think that's been a positive change, and something some people are still kind of coming on board with a bit, I think.
Definitely, yeah. Back in the day, it was definitely this idea, wasn't it, that if you're going to be running 10 miles, then you need to be doing loads of reps and keeping it light to kind of mimic that endurance, wasn't it? When did it change? I don't remember. I remember I used to prescribe kind of light reps to runners, and then suddenly I was doing heavy, but I can't remember what brought it about.
I'm not 100% sure if I would be able to pinpoint a particular time point or particular study, but I think it's something sort of evolved a little bit over time, and it's something that I think is needed to evolve with our rehab too. That hopefully people are realizing now that you do need to work people and challenge people a little bit if you're going to build strength, and that will sometimes need to involve lifting heavy, but heavy is relative. It doesn't necessarily have to be in huge weights, because if someone's very weak, like body weight in the early stages may well be heavy for that person. So it's all relative. But sending someone away with an exercise to achieve strength when they can do 50 reps before hitting fatigue, it's not really going to be a strengthener for that person. So I think that's a big thing that I've learned. I remember the exercises I used to give out back in the day. I used to consider like a single leg mini squat a high level knee exercise. An unloaded single leg mini squat, not even a proper single leg squat, like a little small knee bend. I was like, yeah, that's one of the tough ones for the knee. And now I'm like, okay, no, that's not really. That's sort of pretty simple. You've got to load people up if you want to get them stronger.
Definitely. I think the calf research as well. I think showing how much load the calf really takes, particularly the soleus rehab, where you really got to persuade people to, a lot of the time, just get to the gym, because you're never going to find enough weight at home, even with your kids sitting on your knee, to mimic the load it goes through. Yeah, it's a healthy thing. Strength is, but like you say, it's taking a bit of a bash, isn't it? Strength training.
Yeah, I mean, strength. I don't know. Strength training seems to be the one at the moment that people are, very much behind. And I'm a big fan. I think there's lots of benefits beyond just simply getting stronger. I think there's lots of like psychological benefits to telling someone that you know your body will do well if you lift. You know, you can actually strengthen it up, and that's a positive thing. So I think there's lots of positive to it, but it is the one that's perhaps a little bit immune to criticism. Because it's very kind of fashionable. And I think maybe we need to be a little bit prepared to recognize some of the big limitations. The biggest is people actually doing the exercise. You know, there's a paper from back in the 90s looking at compliance with the physio exercises suggests that 70% of people don't do their exercises as instructed. And I think that's one of the biggest things is you can create this wonderful exercise program that you think is really evidence-based, but if a patient doesn't do it, it's not going to do anything for them. And that's probably the biggest stumbling block. And some of the things that are barriers to that are things like pain. Like we know that when you look at some of the kind of studies on adherence, pain is quite a significant barrier. So this is where, again, like our reluctance to do anything like hands-on that may address pain becomes possibly something that could create a barrier for this person to do their exercises, and where perhaps we could be a little bit more flexible around that. It might help people actually get doing the stuff they want to do, really. So again, it's sort of, the more you think about it, to my mind, the more interwoven these things are. I think that's why we need a bit of flexibility in our approach, you know, to help each individual get where they want to be.
Most definitely. I think what you said is so true. It's all very well saying people need to lift heavy, but getting a runner just to do some exercises at home is difficult enough. But getting to actually go to a gym where they do not feel at home at all, doing some heavy kind of deadlifts and stuff, it's a real problem, isn't it?
What I've tended to do recently, and this is based on a research paper actually in, I think, 2018, where they found that if people, even if they worked for less than 15 minutes 3 times a week, they could improve their strength and endurance. And so what I tend to try and do with runners is to create roughly a 15-minute exercise circuit that they do 3 times a week. And I do it as a circuit, so it's very time efficient. So we might we had one this evening, so we might say, okay, well, let's get you squatting in the first half, first exercise to work your quads. Once you've finished that, let's get you to do some calf raises to hit the calf, and it will give the quads a chance to recover. Then let's do some resistance work for the glutes as your third exercise. And by the time you finish those, your quads will be fresh and you can go back to loading up those quads with your squats again. And you go through that cycle typically 2 or 3 times, trying to hit fatigue at around about 8 to 12 reps in each of those exercises. And I get people to time it, because it's very hard to do, like, to plan an activity in your day if you don't know how long it takes. So if someone's timed it and said, you know, I can do this circuit in about 15 minutes, then they know that's all they've really got to look for in their day. And I think most of us can probably find that 15 minutes, you know, 3 times a week. So for me, I quite like research like that, because it kind of feeds into reality, real life solutions, you know, instead of people thinking, oh God, I've got to get to the gym. Well, not necessarily, you know, you can get some kit, you can do it at home. There's lots of other ways to get where you want to be with the strength stuff. Fantastic.
No problems. Any solutions. That's great. Jack March would probably hate this episode of Runchatlive because we're just sitting there nodding, and he'd probably vote it as his least favorite. Still remember that, Jack March. I'm still
yeah.
But anyway, look,
I remember that.
Remember that, yeah, least popular episode of Physio Matters podcast, because they kept agreeing.
I know, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
Bless him.
That's the problem with me and you, mate. We get on too well.
There must be something we disagree on. Anyway, I'm sure we'll find it.
Yeah.
So we're running out of time, so I'm going to change what's on the screen for the last thing, which we really do need to talk about, and that is dun, dun, dun. There you go, Running Rehab from Pain to Performance. What a great title. Happening on April 24th. Yes.
Yeah, the Friday before London Marathon.
It is. Tell us about it, mate. Very, very exciting. You got some great speakers. Tell us, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to it, because we've got some fantastic speakers, and like, to explain the title, like Running Rehab from Pain to Performance, the idea I had was, could we present like a patient's rehab journey from initial assessment and pain through to performance, and have different speakers covering aspects along that rehab journey to show how we can look after a runner through that process. So I start the day talking about assessing that runner, and how we can look at things like their training load and get that to the right level, what assessment tests and things I might do. And then it goes on to Claire Minshull, who's going to talk about rehab and strength and conditioning. So how we can get the right exercise in place and progress it. And then it goes on to Ian Griffiths, who is a brilliant podiatrist, who will talk about the role of podiatry and whether there might be a role for orthoses in this particular presentation. And then we've got Chris Napier traveling over from Canada to talk about how gait retraining might fit within that and to share some of his new research. And then the day ends with Alex Hutchinson presenting on how we might optimize recovery and performance. So we're hoping to kind of tell a story through the day, and we're going to share one case study which everyone will talk about. So you'll hopefully be able to sort of see how this one particular case would evolve through from pain to optimizing performance. So that's the plan.
Genius. Very exciting. What a great idea. I don't think it's been done before either.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. And I think just, with the particular speakers we've been able to get, they're all fantastic people. And, I was just excited about how we're all going to approach it. And I think it's good as well. We don't necessarily approach it all the same. There are differences in how we do things. And that's good. That can be celebrated, actually. Because I think if there's different ways to get to the same place, that's good. That's options for patients. It doesn't need to be a source for argument. That can be a good thing. So,
and who would you recommend this day is going to be for?
So it's aimed at people that are looking after runners. So that would include obviously therapists, physiotherapists, sports therapists, osteopaths, chiropractors, running coaches if they're interested. I think it would be an interesting day for them. Runchatlive, you had some really good runners there, well-informed runners that were interested in that, and I chatted to some of those on the event actually, and I think they got a lot out of it. So similar kind of thing. If someone's really into running and wants to know a little bit more about it, I think there would be stuff that for them to take home as well. I think
that's really good. I mean, I'm starting to measure. It depends, but I do love conferences which put together clinicians and patients as well, or runners as well. I think it's great that there's that common ground where they can talk to each other and even have questions where one would go, right, you've been talking about this, but it really doesn't make any sense. Or this isn't how I feel, this isn't what I want, or something else. It's going to be great. Very good day. And if people want to buy tickets or get more information, is it all at your website?
Yeah, you can go to runningphysio.com, so it's running-physio.com, and all the details are on there. So you can go and have a look at that. It's a one-day conference, that one, in London. And, we're going to throw in some lunch as well, keep people fed. So,
really? You're including that?
Yeah.
Oh, you're starting a dangerous trend there, really.
We thought about it. It's a nice thing to do. We thought what would be good is if we can share, and it's going to be a light lunch. We're not kind of serving lobster thermidor or anything, but we thought it keeps people on site and people can chat and network over a nice ciabatta or something like that over lunchtime. So we thought that would be a nice way of keeping people on site. So.
A nice ciabatta. You still managed to put a certain level of class in there rather than just a sandwich.
Yeah,
a nice
bag of co-op sandwiches. Yeah,
ciabatta.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very exciting. Well, it's 9:10. Thank you so much, Tom, for coming to join us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a genuine pleasure, mate. Really been good.
There's some fantastic information in here. I'm really looking forward to listening back to it myself. That's happening April the 24th. Have you still got any other of your normal running rehab courses happening before then, or?
Yeah, it's a busy schedule. Pretty much, I tend to try and do one a month. So today we've just announced new courses in London. I think we've got London, Glasgow, Stevenage, and Leeds. 4 new ones that we've announced. We've got courses coming up in Bath and Reading and Worthing. So it's going to be a busy schedule, but nice. It's always nice. I like meeting people that are treating runners and chatting and learning from each other. It's all good fun.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate it because I know you're a very busy man, and I'm looking forward to receiving the feedback on this one. There's some great stuff there because, again, I mean, I always say it, but the common theme between all of my guests, because one of the great things about podcast or live streaming is you choose your guests. There's always a modesty there. There's always the kind of person you could meet on the street and have a chat with and on the same level. And you, like all my guests, kind of personify that greatly. So I do thank you for all of the work you've done with runningphysio.com. And I look forward to seeing you in April. I'm very excited about that. And what a great lineup of speakers. Anything?
Thanks very much, mate. Yeah, it's very kind of you. I think we're on the same page. I think you're similar in that we don't have to be kind of rigid in our views. We can have a bit of humility, I think, and that's a good thing, I reckon.
You're better than me. I try. On a scale of 0 to Adam Meakins, I'm probably about a 6. You're down on the 5 or 4, which is nice. Sometimes it's people like you who pull me back a little bit.
There's room for everyone on the scale. I think there's room for everyone. I think that's a good thing. You got to have a few shouty, ranty people as well. It would be boring if we were all the same.
Oh God, yes, it'd be terrible. Yeah. All right, mate. I'll let you get back to your family. Well, I take it.
Yeah, all good. I'm going to dive into a big pizza now. That's my plan.
Exactly. Every day.
There's a bit of cheese in it, you see, for the cheese addiction. Just a little bit.
All right, dude. Right. Well, thanks so much for giving up your time. I will share links and things with you for people to listen to this. It's been great having you for the hour. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks again, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I will come back down into the lobby in a second. Thank you. I'm just going to get rid of you now. All right, mate. Thank you.
Bye.
What a lovely bloke. Anyone who knows Tom already will have known he's a great bloke. But if you don't know him or you're not familiar with running physio.com or running/physio.com, then do head over to the website. If you're running and you haven't been there, then you must have been born under a rock or something, because it's a fantastic, awesome resource. And on top of that now, which has been going for years, you've now got the rehab workshops and the big conference on the 24th. So if you are interested in that, then go to www.running-physio.com and maybe I'll see. Well, I will if you go. I'll see you there as well, along with the other speakers. Right. So this has been Run Chat Live 40. It's been on YouTube. I'm not sure whether I'm going to stay on YouTube. I don't know. I'll have a chat to Stephen Healy about it. If you do have any comments, leave them in the feed below. Those of you who joined us live to watch, then thank you very much. If you think you prefer it on YouTube or prefer it on Facebook, let us know that as well, because we're evolving like any good therapist to give you what you need and help and what helps you. So I will just sign off. This is Matt Phillips from Runchatlive, putting the evidence back into running, injury and performance. Thank you very much. You're listening to Run Chat Live podcast, putting the evidence back into running, injury and performance.